Well. A couple days ago, put a video up that was not a review of the Dell XPS 15 because the one that was supposed to be delivered April 8th and I got a shipping notice saying it was going to be delivered April 8th, never arrived. Amazingly, 2.5 days after putting that video up, Dell XPS 15 turns up at my door, so I've been playing with it, goofing around yesterday, got a few thoughts, let's dive in and see what we think. If you know XPSs, you know Dell. They get a lot of criticism and a lot of comments about throttling, about heat, about battery life, okay? I wish I could tell you all those things have gone away, but they haven't. This is a Dell XPS. They have not massively changed the machine. It looks the same as last year's model. It feels the same as last year's model, and there's nothing wrong with that. The XPSs are a premium device. If you're looking in that $2,000-ish range, a MacBook Pro alternative, there are very few options that have a premium fit and finish. You could look at a Surface Laptop Studio, definitely in the ballpark with a 14.4 inch, but the XPSs, you get the 15 and the 17 option. This is a 15 inch. And I still think the 15 inch is the ultimate sweet spot here for a lot of users. You have got a screen that is just big enough that it feels big, but it's not so big that it feels unwieldy, especially on your lap. It's definitely a big laptop, 4.5 pounds or thereabouts, depending on how you spec it out. But it's a big screen, but it doesn't feel as big because the bezels are so small. And then they make a 17-inch version as well that pushes it even higher. This is the 4K screen. And I gotta tell you, it's been a while since I've seen Dell's 4K. The last XPS that I had was an OLED, and I am hugely impressed with this screen. The scaling is perfect for my eyes, at least. The font sizes are balanced. It's one of my issues with a Surface Pro, for example, Surface Pro 8. Screens are great and sharp, but the scaling is just a little bit tight for me. Obviously, we're trying to get a lot of information on the screen, and it doesn't always work when you're just trying to get stuff done. This looks really great, which means the 1920 by 1080 FHD screen is going to look just as good from a scaling perspective and size of fonts by default. And you might say, but Mike, why does that matter? Because if you go out of default and you start to play with scaling, things get squirrely real quick. And if you plug in an external monitor, they get even more squirrely. So you want to try and keep that at the default setting as much as possible. There was a moment when I was playing with this yesterday and I had something very colorful on the screen and I had to take a double take. The colors were so deep, they were so rich, I almost thought for a second they'd sent me an OLED by mistake. I'm not saying it looks like that every time, but whatever it was I had on my screen just looked glorious. So if you're looking for a high-end screen, this is definitely a beauty. You've got the touch, you've got all the kind of bells and whistles you would expect. And here you can see the specs that I went with. This is an i7 12th gen. It's a 64 gig spec. It's a terabyte. It's the NVIDIA 3050 Ti. This thing's spec'd out about 27 and change. So it's in the middle of the $2,499 low-end MacBook Pro and the $3,500 higher-end MacBook Pro. And I gotta tell you, I think it's a great sweet spot. Didn't need to go 64 gig. We were just having fun with it. We wanted to see what we could do. If I'd have gone 32 gig, I'd have been at about the same price as a MacBook Pro. So I'd have had 32 gig 1 terabyte NVIDIA 3050 Ti for the same price as an M1 Pro 16 gig 512. A lot more spec. Yes, Windows needs a little bit more of it, but depending on what you're doing and what you're working on, obviously we make video, so having extra memory is nice. And we run our video speed test on this bad boy like we do on a lot of machines. And here's some results for you. It clocked in right at 2 minutes 50 seconds. By comparison, the M1 Pro MacBook Pro came in at like 6 minutes something. So this can definitely export and churn through some 4K H.264 footage really quickly. The only thing that I've tested in my studio with that file that's been quicker than this is still the reigning champion, my desktop Alienware, pretty high spec bad boy with an AMD Ryzen processor, and that came in at just under 2 minutes and 30 seconds or thereabouts. So this is really close for a laptop. It was impressive, and interestingly, I took a little bit of footage with my phone here as it was going. Listen. Yes, the fans were on, but they're not jet engines, okay? A MacBook Pro turns its fans on when it's under load, and you can hear them. They're not as quiet as everybody makes out. They're certainly not silent. When you really push it, you're gonna hear those bad boys come on. I don't think these fans under load were that much louder than the MacBook Pro under load. The big difference is these fans will kick on a lot quicker than a MacBook Pro. You've really got to be pushing it to make those things fire up. As I'm moving around this computer, and I'm just clicking on things, I'm just going to open Explorer, for example. Let's load up Google, just so you can kind of see. It definitely feels quick. This is on the balance setting. It's not on the high performance setting. I got no fans running right now. It's nice and quiet. It definitely feels zippy and snappy, which is what you would expect. The challenge is it doesn't really feel any zippier and any snappier than the 11th gen. And it's got 64 gig. And I think that's the challenge here. We've gotten to a point, and this is why 8 gig, 256 gig has stayed around for so long. We've gotten to a point where for normal day-to-day type stuff, moving on up in the performance rankings doesn't really make any difference anymore. Last year's model was fast. This year's model's fast. Last year's model loaded web pages just fine. This one does the same. Really now we're eking at milliseconds, or it's for the heavy work, the heavy Lightroom and Photoshop editing, the heavy video editing, the heavy coding and stuff that's really power dependent is where you're going to see a little bit of a difference. But overall, if you have an 11th gen, after using this, I'm not sure I'd spend the money and upgrade. If you're spending money and you're thinking I could go get an 11th gen from the Dell outlet and I could save a bunch of money, I don't know that I'd be telling you to spend any extra. You can pick up an 11th gen at the outlet for $1,600-ish, maybe $1,700, with a 4K screen or an OLED screen. That's $500 to $1,000 less than buying the new 12th. The 12th gens are supposed to have this power efficiency thing. I don't know what to tell you. I've been goofing around on this just for a little while, and I'm at 93%. Obviously, this is literally like first couple of days of having the machine. I'm sure it's going to get a little bit better, but let's be honest. This is going to be, at best, a 10% an hour laptop for normal day-to-day use, is my guesstimate from what I'm seeing right now. Again, not very different than the previous gen. So these efficiency cores on the Intel processors, I'm not seeing a whole lot of benefit right now, and I'm playing with a few of them. I've got a Lenovo in the studio. I'm going to be dropping that video here in a week or so once I've been able to goof around with that a little bit more. Yes, it's an i7. Yes, it's a 3050. I kind of hope for a little bit more. So again, we see this bifurcation between something like an XPS 15 and a MacBook Pro, M1 Pro, where Apple's definitely got the low power thing figured out. And when you're doing dumb everyday stuff, the low power is going to be silent. It's going to be super battery life. Put it under load. My 16-inch MacBook Pro would still churn out 4 or 5 hour battery life if I was doing a lot of heavy intensive video editing. This is about the same. So under load, I think Intel have made some improvements. The difference is it is more powerful, it would appear, and it churns through this stuff a whole lot easier. So in that respect, kudos, I'm pretty impressed. Keyboard feels great. Nothing different, nice solid firm presses. Always been a fan of the XPS keyboard, still not my all-time favorites. I think that still goes to the Surface. I could definitely work on this all day long. All the keys are where they should be. No weird shenanigans, no weird page up, page down on the side or anything. Centered, balanced, it looks right. It definitely is beautiful. You may be asking me, Mike, what about the trackpad? Because if we remember, when last year's came out, the trackpad had a ton of issues. They had corners that didn't click right. They had trackpads that rattled and wobbled. I've been clicking on this bad boy, and I can't decide. It feels good. But it kind of sounds like there is, just occasionally, a little bit of a rattle. I don't get it on the top half of the trackpad, but I do get a little bit of play on the bottom. I don't know if it's a layer or a gap between the trackpad and the inner mechanisms like the previous gen. I'm not convinced that's what it is, but clicking on the bottom, I don't know. I'm not 100%. So I've got another one of these on order, which is OLED. I'm curious to see how different that is. And once I've got it, I'll drop an update in the comments. I'm going to upload a new video for you, but I'll drop an update in the comments and let you know whether it does the same thing as this. It feels fine. It feels great. I don't think it's as bad as last year's issues were. It could just be me nitpicking because I know there was a problem before, but I just wanted to be honest with you and tell you what we got going on here. Ports are the same. Got the memory card slot here, and I got my USB-Cs all over the place. Look, it's an XPS 15. It's all the goodies. It's a high-end machine. If you're spending $2,000, I don't know what you're going to buy really in that price point that's gonna give you more than this. Would I pick a Surface Laptop Studio over this? No, I don't think I would. The 15-inch screen is glorious. Now, if I was looking at the bottom end, full high def, I might go Surface Laptop. 14.4 is not much smaller, 3:2 ratio, so a little taller, touchscreen, pen input. Yeah, I could probably do that over the standard Full HD. I think it's a shame that Dell's decided to stick with a regular high-def screen as the base model. I get you want to get the price down, i5, regular high-def, $14.99 I think it is, or $15.49, somewhere around that kind of price point. Obviously it's cheaper than Surface Laptop Studio and a lot of other things. I guess if you just need that, you're okay, but I don't think most people buying this laptop are buying it for a low-spec machine. I would love to have seen an i5 with an OLED or a 4K as the base model at maybe $17.99 or $18.99. Yes, you can spec it out, but you're going to be waiting a while because they are definitely backed up on these things. And so, should you buy one? I think if you're looking for a powerful Windows machine and you need a nice touch, high-res screen, this is probably the one to get. I don't know what else I would go for that would make me feel happier than using this day to day. Are you going to have great battery life? It is what it is. But do you really need 15-hour battery life? Or is 8 or 9 hours enough to get you through a day? Let me know what you think. Leave me some comments below. And until next time, just go out there and be amazing.